Just gonna throw a little bit extra boost at it. Maybe it'll be my famous last words. Okay. Everything looks good. What's going on, everybody? My name is Greg Peters, and we're once again at Advanced Engine Dynamics, your one-stop shop for Southern California Miata tuning. And I have behind me my 1992 Miata with a freshly built engine. So what we have inside here is an NB2 Miata engine, so a 2001 VVT engine. It is fairly built, forged bottom end, turbo, Maruha Motors stroker crankshaft, bringing it up to 1.9 liters, Wiseco high compression pistons. We're talking 12-to-1 compression turbo on this engine, and I think it's gonna make some excellent power. It runs on E85. It is fire breathing. Now, I'll spare you all the technical details of the engine. If you want to know exactly what is inside this beast, I'll link you to some resources down below so you can check it out. As far as today's power goals, I think this car should have no problem making north of 400 horsepower, but it's more about just that peak power number. This car from day one has been all about area under the curve. It's just a fun street car. I just like to take it out, have fun with it, blast around town. So I want a nice, thick torque curve, and I think all that compression is going to do wonders. We'll see how it stacks up compared to the last turbo engine I had in this car, and as always, I'm going to have a whole technical article with a bunch of dyno graphs and more information for you guys down in the description below. So yeah, what do you say we do our first baseline pull and jump into making some power? Okay, this is going to be our first pull of the day, baseline run. This is just exactly how I've been ripping it around the street. I just kind of threw a somewhat conservative tune on it, but my prediction is it's still going to make 350 wheel horsepower because this thing still has some jam even on the conservative tune that it has. So got my laptop ready to go, take some data logs, do some tuning. We're sitting on the dyno and we're ready to roll. I don't know what happened on this first pull, but somehow my camera glitched out and I didn't record it. But fear not, there's going to be plenty of pulls in this video. Here's my first run. Pretty close on my guess, but I had some pretty bad misfires on this run, so I did a couple more pulls back to back, and it cleared up a little bit, but I still had a bit of a misfire. So what we ended up doing is pulling the plugs, checking the gap. The gap was kind of big, about 32 thousandths of an inch. We gapped them down to 22 thousandths of an inch, threw them back in, and did another pull. So after gapping the plugs down, you can see it did make a little bit more power at 380, but the biggest difference is no more misfires, and you can see just how much smoother that dyno graph is, and now we can carry on with tuning. So the first thing I did was added 5% to the boost duty cycle, and that bumped boost pressure from 16 to about 18 psi. See a decent bump in power across the rev range, only 11 horsepower at peak because the boost was kind of falling off in the high RPM where the engine is actually making peak horsepower. And I'll be messing with the boost control plenty throughout the day to correct that, but the next thing I wanted to do was add 2 degrees of ignition advance to see how it affected power.
Peak of 20 pounds.
Oh my God, that was 2 degrees of timing, 2 degrees of ignition timing, 29 wheel horsepower at the same boost level. That's how you know you don't have enough timing in your tune. When the engine's responding like that to timing, couple degrees, oh my God. The engine's already at the power it was when I fully tuned the first engine for it, and I ain't done yet. I'm not gonna go crazy, like I said, but that's 413 horsepower, like, easy. I've touched like 2 things in the tune. This thing's gonna be fast, brother. Okay, we're moving pretty fast. I'm gonna pull up the dyno chart here real quick. Yeah, that's 441 wheel horsepower, 391, creeping up on that 400 foot-pounds of torque range. Don't think I'm gonna take it much above like 450 today. The turbo I know is really happy right at that 450 range. Above that, I'm kind of trying to push it out of its efficiency range. It will do more, as I know from the last engine, which made 523, but high compression, all new engine. I'm just happy to have a really fast Miata, and it's gonna be plenty fast. But I'm not even close to done yet. I still have some optimizations to make. The boost is falling off up top, so it's running 23 to 24 pounds in the mid-range, which is more than I thought I would be running, but engine still seems to be happy. And then it is tapering down to 18 to 19 pounds at the very high RPM. So I need to work with that boost taper a little bit and try to get the boost to run flat all the way to 7,000. And then I want to spend some time doing some VVT tuning to see if I can get the turbo to come on any faster with that, or just see what the engine likes and what it doesn't like. That's the whole purpose of being here on the dyno. And also I have to work on the lower RPM boost control. One of the biggest benefits to having electronic boost control is you can force the wastegate to stay shut longer, rather than if you're just running a wastegate spring and you're running a direct reference line to that wastegate with no boost controller, the wastegate's gonna start cracking open gradually as your engine makes more boost. But with a boost controller, even if you have a 12-pound spring and you run electronic boost control, at 12 pounds, your turbo can still spool faster if it's tuned properly, because the boost controller is withholding the pressure that normally opens the wastegate until the last second. So you're building up that boost as fast as possible, and then the boost controller feeds that pressure into the wastegate, the piston that controls the wastegate, and it blows open, and then your boost control just sits flat. If you get too aggressive with it, what you'll end up with is over boosting, and then the boost will settle back down. So as with everything, it's a fine balance. I'm glad I got to this power level so quick, because now I can kind of mess with some of the more fine details. So let's get to it. Well, okay, hold on. First, let me show you this. Why? This always happens. Every time I'm here, this happens. What did I say not 15 minutes ago? 450 horsepower, and I'll be happy. Listen, what happened is, it just wanted to make the 500. I didn't even do it on purpose. 480 wheel, 2 degrees of timing, 501 horsepower. Now I'm actually calling it at 501, okay? I don't need to push my luck anymore. This thing's already gonna be ridiculously fast. But like I said, I still do have some detail work to do. It's already doing really well, but I'm on the dyno here, so I might as well make use of this awesome tool. These two dynos perfectly illustrate the benefit of running a boost controller versus just running wastegate spring alone. The blue run is the result of low RPM boost control tuning, and the green run is before the tuning was done. Above 3,500 RPM, the torque curves start to diverge, and that's because the wastegate is starting to crack open on the green run, which is letting exhaust gases bypass the turbine and slow down the spool up. If we take a close look, you can see the blue torque curve is hitting 400 foot-pounds of torque by about 4,200 RPM, and the green curve doesn't reach 400 foot-pounds until 500 RPM later at about 4,700 RPM. But just like I talked about earlier, I got a little too aggressive on the blue run, which resulted in slight overboost, so I'll have to mellow that out just a bit. After I finished with the EBC tuning, I let the car cool off for a bit and went for another full pull. All right, so we're at 507 wheel horsepower peak, just over 400 foot-pounds of torque. I might pull a little bit of timing out of it just to be extra safe on the street, but I am extremely satisfied. Right now, I am going to work with the VVT a little bit, and because I don't want to wring this thing out at 500 horsepower over and over and over on these long pulls, what I'm going to do for the VVT tuning is I'm actually going to turn the boost down quite a bit and just do the pulls a gear lower in third gear so they're a little bit quicker. And I just kind of want to of get some back-to-back data at the different levels of VVT settings, and it'll help me kind of get a VVT curve that's optimal for this engine. So I'm gonna jump into that now. VVT stands for variable valve timing, and it's a system that this engine has on the intake cam that can change when the intake valves open and close. It's basically like having an adjustable cam gear, except you can control the angle of the gear at any RPM and boost level from 0 to 44 degrees and anything in between. In this overlay, the boost controller is turned off for both runs. The blue run has VVT set to 0 for the entire pull, and the pink run has VVT set to 30 degrees for the entire pull. You can clearly see with some VVT advance that the engine makes much more power at the same boost level in the low RPM. In fact, at 4,000 RPM, 30 degrees of VVT advance brings torque from 222 foot-pounds to a whopping 260 foot-pounds. But in the high RPM, power is falling off drastically. So I repeated this process with several pulls at different VVT angles to put together a VVT curve that, in theory, should combine the low and high RPM powers together. So how did it turn out? Well, that would be the green run. You can see it follows right along with the pink curve in the low RPM, and as VVT tapers to 0, it starts following the blue run. It is the best of both worlds. Now let's crank the boost back up and see how a full pull looks. $512 horsepower. Toby's saying you're right there, man. It's only another 11 horsepower to tie your record, 12 horsepower to beat it. You know, I'm not gonna say that I'm giving in to peer pressure, but sitting on the dyno with the hood up, with the fans on full blast, line hooked up from the motor to my ear, listening for detonation, this is pretty much the safest possible place that I could try to break a record. So, just gonna throw a little bit extra boost at it. Maybe it'll be my famous last words. Maybe it'll be a new record. We'll find out. We're done. We're done. We're done. We're done. Oh no. Yeah. Oh my God. It's a new record, boys. Oh, that's terrifying. Okay, so I'm gonna put it back to the 500 settings now and do a last pull. Oh man. Rule number 1 on the dyno, never say you're about to do your last pull. Nah, I'm just kidding. Here it is. And it looks beautiful. And this is one heck of a fast Miata at 504 horsepower. But before the video's over, I want to take a look at one last thing, which I've been waiting to do all day. This is an overlay of my last engine and the current one on their max power runs. Mechanically, the only differences between these engines are one has a little bit more displacement thanks to the 87mm Maruha stroker crank, and it's got 12:1 compression compared to 9:1 in the old engine. engine. Everything else is the same. The turbo, the fuel, the manifolds, the dyno is even the same, etc. In the low RPM, it's really not that much of a difference. It did make about an extra 20 foot-pounds of torque everywhere, which is cool, I'll take it. In the mid-range, the old engine did make more torque, but that's because I ran a metric ton of boost and timing to get it there, so it's tough to make an apples-to-apples comparison in the region of these graphs. But there are two distinct points that have given me the data that I've been patiently waiting for, and that's where the graphs cross each other, aka where the two engines were making exactly the same amount of power. So let's compare those alongside the information from the data logs of those runs. Point 1 is at 4,600 RPM, where both engines are making exactly 429 foot-pounds of torque and 374 horsepower. The low compression engine was at 28.2 psi and 20.8 degrees of ignition timing. The high compression engine only took 25.3 psi, a difference of almost 3 psi less, and 16.8 degrees of ignition timing, or 4 degrees less. But at the second crossover, it gets even more drastic. At 6,600 RPM, both engines are making 411 foot-pounds of torque and 520 horsepower. The low compression engine took 31.7 psi to get there, along with 26.4 degrees of ignition advance. Meanwhile, on the high compression engine, it only took 26.6 psi. That's a difference of over 5 psi less, along with 20 degrees of ignition advance, over 6 degrees less. So in a nutshell, the new engine is able to make the same amount of power with significantly less boost and timing, and that shows you the exact difference of going to higher compression. Now my final tune ended up being about 23.5 psi and 19 degrees of ignition timing at peak horsepower, which is this chart here. And I feel like I have to say this in all my dyno videos now, that I push my own setups pretty hard, and it's not really realistic for you to bring your car to a tuner who's accepting the liability of tuning your engine for reliable and safe power and telling them,
"So I have the same turbo as Greg Peters, and I want 500 horsepower because that's how much he made."
Because they're most likely not going to turn up those knobs quite as high as me. Because I'm accepting the responsibility for my own engine, and I'm really out here shooting for the stars in the name of good information. Okay, but why did I build a high compression turbo engine? And the answer is because I just want the data. And now I got the data. So many people ask me, Greg, I'm building my turbo engine, I'm down to the point of choosing my pistons, what compression ratio do I go with? So hopefully this video will give you a little bit of insight as to what changing just the compression ratio on a setup will do. Now, would I recommend building a high compression turbo engine? Yes, but only if two circumstances are met. Number one, you're completely okay with always running E85. E85 only. You are not running any other fuel. It will not be safe to do so. And number two, you're really interested in extracting the most amount of power from your engine on a given setup. And I know the immediate answer from most people is going to say, well, of course I want the most power. But are you willing to have it be a little bit less safe, a little bit more prone to detonation? Are you heavily tracking your car? Is it really hot where you live? Do you have a good tuner? All these things come into play. So for the majority of people, if you just build your engine with, say, a 9-to-1 piston, you're gonna have plenty of power. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be safer to tune. You'll be able to run on 91 or 93 octane, whatever your premium is where you live, and you're just gonna have a good time. So take all those things into consideration when you're choosing your pistons, when you're choosing your engine parts, and I hope you learned something. So anyways, back to the video. All right guys, well, another insane day at Advanced Engine Dynamics. New horsepower record for the VVT Beast, 526. Turned down just slightly to about 502 or 501 for safety. But needless to say, I'm extremely satisfied. I can't wait to rip this thing. It's actually starting to rain right now, so I'm gonna have to postpone the first pulls. Just need to get home safely with the 1% tread that's left on my front tires. But yeah, that's all. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. Check out the articles down listed in the description below, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out. Just an incredible car. I mean, if this ain't a daily driver, I don't know what is. We're just sitting stuck in traffic. Just regular traffic, as they say. 500 horsepower though. I'm talking about. So we got about an hour and a half drive ahead of us. I don't know why I'm saying us, me in the car, I guess. Then we'll be home. Successful day so far. Don't want to speak too soon, but so far so good. I mean, I had to give it at least one test hit. I really wanted to make sure it was going to make it home, but I couldn't go the whole drive without just one hit. That's really fast. That is really fast. That is rad. Oh my gosh. Hey, what'd you bring me? Give me that. We made it. Oh my god. Hey, that's mine now. That's mine. Better get ready.